November 1943, somewhere over the central Pacific. The sky is clear, almost peaceful, an endless blue bowl stretching from horizon to horizon. Far below, sunlight ripples across the ocean, broken only by scattered cloud shadows drifting slowly east. Inside his Mitsubishi A6M0, Lieutenant Hiroshi Tanaka tightens his grip on the control stick. He is not new to this. Tanaka is a veteran. He has flown combat patrols since the Solomon Islands. He has watched American fighters burn. He has learned exactly how long to hold the trigger, exactly where to aim, exactly when an enemy aircraft should die. Ahead of him, it is happening again. An American fighter, dark, bulky, unmistakably clumsy, compared to his zero cuts across his nose in a shallow dive. Tanaka rolls smoothly, bringing the aircraft into perfect position. The Zero responds instantly, light as a feather. He squeezes the trigger. The Zero's cannons and machine guns come alive. Tracers streak forward in a tight, disciplined stream. Tanaka watches them walk across the American fighter's fuselage, sparks flashing, metal tearing, smoke beginning to trail from the engine cowling. A textbook kill. The American fighter should shudder. It should slow. It should roll over and fall. It does not. Instead, the aircraft keeps flying. Tanaka blinks, instinctively adjusting his aim. He fires again, longer this time. More hits. The canopy flashes. A chunk of wingskin peels back. Smoke thickens into a gray smear behind the aircraft. Still, it does not fall. The American fighter pulls away in a shallow dive, gaining speed instead of losing it. Tanaka's confidence cracks. This is wrong. He has seen American planes disintegrate under less punishment. He has watched pilots bail out after a single burst. This aircraft has taken hits that should have killed both machine and man. Over the radio, another voice cuts in sharp, strained. I hit one. It is damaged, but it continues flying. Tanaka glances around. The sky is suddenly alive with motion. More American fighters are diving through the formation Grumman F6F Hellcats. Big, heavy, absurdly fast. Tanaka pushes the throttle forward and follows the damaged Hellcat down, determined to finish it. The Zero accelerates quickly, but the gap does not close as fast as it should. The Hellcat dives harder. The airspeed needle on Tanaka's panel climbs dangerously. The Zero begins to tremble, controls stiffening. The American aircraft, riddled with holes, simply keeps going, its structure holding together under stresses that would tear a lighter fighter apart. Tanaka is forced to pull up. Below him, the Hellcat levels out, smoke thinning, then begins to climb slowly at first, then with growing confidence. Tanaka can hardly believe what he is seeing. The American pilot should be wounded. The engine should be failing. The aircraft should be dying. Instead, it is leaving. Later, Tanaka will replay the moment again and again in his mind. He will remember the exact sight picture, the hits, the certainty, and the disbelief when certainty failed him. Back aboard Japanese airfields and carriers, similar stories begin to surface. Pilots describe American fighters returning to their carriers with wings torn open, fuselages punched through, engines leaking oil, and yet still landing safely. Still flying again days later. The Hellcat is not just hard to kill. It is built to survive being hit. For Japanese pilots trained in a doctrine of lightness and maneuverability, this represents something deeply unsettling. The Zero was designed to avoid being hit at all. Once struck, it rarely forgives. The Hellcat forgives constantly. American pilots feel it too. Inside Hellcat cockpits, men discover something entirely new. The sensation of being shot and living. Bullets slam into armor plates instead of flesh. Fuel tanks seal themselves. Control cables remain intact. Aircraft that should be coffins become lifeboats. Confidence grows. Aggression follows. For Japanese aces like Tanaka, the sky is no longer governed by familiar rules. Skill still matters. Courage still matters. But now there is something else in the fight, something heavier, louder, and brutally indifferent to tradition. An American fighter that refuses to die. And this realization, more than any single loss, begins to erode the foundation of Japanese air superiority. Late afternoon, the deck of an American aircraft carrier rolls gently under a pale Pacific sun. The day's combat patrols are returning. Deck crews move with practiced urgency, eyes scanning the sky for silhouettes limping back from the fight. One Hellcat appears low on the horizon. At first glance, it looks wrong. As it closes, the damage becomes visible. The left wing is shredded, metal peeled back like torn fabric. Dark streaks of oil trail along the fuselage. Holes pepper the cowling and tail section. Smoke curls faintly from the engine. Any Wildcat would already be in the ocean. The Hellcat lines up anyway. The pilot face tight, jaw-clenched, fights the controls as the aircraft settles onto the deck. The arresting hook catches. The fighter slams to a stop in a shower of sparks and steam. For a moment, everything is silent. Then the canopy opens. The pilot climbs out on shaking legs, helped down by deck crewmen who stare openly at the aircraft. One of them runs a hand along the wing, fingers slipping into a jagged hole clean through the metal. Jesus, someone mutters. You took a beating. The pilot nods, voice hoarse. They hit me. I thought I was done. But he isn't. And neither is the Hellcat. Below decks, in ready rooms heavy with cigarette smoke and exhaustion, pilots compare notes. They talk about being hit and still flying. about engines that kept running when they shouldn't have, about rounds that slammed into the cockpit area and stopped cold in armor plate, bolted behind their seats. One veteran leans back, helmet on the table in front of him. "In a Wildcat," he says quietly, "I'd be dead." Everyone in the room knows he's right. The Hellcat changes the psychology of combat as much as the mechanics. Pilots stop thinking only about escape. They start pressing attacks longer. They stay on target. They dive deeper. They trust that their aircraft will not betray them the moment something goes wrong. Japanese pilots feel this shift immediately. Zero's score hits good hits, but the Americans do not fall away. The expected rhythm of combat breaks down. Where once a burst meant a kill, now it means uncertainty. Radio traffic reflects it. "I struck the enemy. He is damaged. He does not fall." For men trained to fight with precision and efficiency, this is deeply unsettling. Ammunition is limited. Fuel is precious. Every second spent chasing a damaged aircraft is a second exposed to unseen attackers diving from above. The Hellcat does not need to be perfect. It only needs to endure. And it does. Again and again, American fighters return riddled with holes, pilots alive who would have been lost just a year earlier. Maintenance crews patch them up. New panels are riveted on. Engines are swapped out. By the next day, many of those same aircraft are back on the flight line. Japanese intelligence officers begin collecting reports. The pattern is impossible to ignore. The Americans are flying aircraft that absorb punishment instead of avoiding it, and that changes everything. Air combat is no longer decided only by who shoots first. It is decided by who survives long enough to shoot again. For Japanese aces, this realization cuts deep. The Zero's greatest strength, its lightness, is now a fatal weakness. To match the Hellcat's toughness would require redesigns, materials, and production capacity Japan simply does not have. And with every encounter, the truth becomes harder to escape. They are not just fighting better pilots. They are fighting machines built for a different kind of war. By early 1944, Japanese pilots begin entering combat with a new and dangerous thought already in their minds. Even if I hit him, he may not die. That hesitation is deadly. In the cockpit of a Zero, combat has always been about precision, short bursts, close range, one clean firing pass, then disengage. The aircraft is not built for prolonged exchanges. It cannot afford mistakes. Against the Hellcat, that doctrine starts to fail. Japanese pilots score hits, visible hits. Panels fly off. Smoke pours from engines. Yet the American fighters continue to maneuver, continue to climb, continue to fight. They dive away, regroup, and come back down with altitude and speed on their side. Every failed kill drains confidence. Veteran aces try to compensate. They fire longer bursts. They chase damaged aircraft farther than doctrine allows. They stay in the fight just seconds too long, and those seconds are enough. A Hellcat drops out of the sun. 6 heavy machine guns fire at once. The Zero shudders, then comes apart. Survivors begin to notice a cruel pattern. The Americans do not panic when hit. They do not immediately break off. They trust their aircraft in a way Japanese pilots cannot afford to trust theirs. In Japanese ready rooms, the conversations grow darker. Pilots speak in lowered voices about aircraft that should have been destroyed, about opponents who keep coming back, about the feeling that they are expending effort for diminishing returns. And beneath it all is an unspoken truth: experience is no longer enough. Young Japanese pilots are being thrown into combat faster than ever before. Their training hours are slashed. Fuel shortages limit practice flights. They face Hellcats flown by men who have already survived dozens of engagements and whose aircraft are built to keep them alive. The imbalance compounds itself. Each American pilot saved by armor and self-sealing tanks becomes a veteran. Each Japanese pilot lost is irreplaceable. This is how air superiority truly shifts, not in dramatic announcements, but in arithmetic. By the time Japanese commanders recognize the scale of the problem, it is already too late. Production cannot match losses. New aircraft cannot be fielded in meaningful numbers. Tactical innovation cannot overcome structural disadvantage. The Hellcat has done more than outfight the Zero. It has broken the assumption that skill alone decides the battle. Somewhere over the Pacific, another Japanese pilot squeezes the trigger, watches his round strike home, and feels the same cold disbelief when the American fighter does not fall. In that moment, something essential is lost. Not just altitude, not just an aircraft. Faith. Mid-1944. American carrier task forces move westward across the Pacific like mobile airfields, each one bristling with radar, anti-aircraft guns, and squadrons of Hellcats cycling endlessly between deck and sky. The air war is no longer reactive. It is systematic. For Hellcat pilots, the mission profile has changed. Early in the war, survival was the goal. Now, survival is assumed. Pilots climb into their aircraft knowing that even if something goes wrong, if they are hit, if an engine falters, if they misjudge a turn, the odds still favor them. That knowledge shapes every decision in the air. They stay in the fight longer. They press attacks harder. They recover, regroup, and return. Japanese pilots sense it immediately. Where once American fighters disengaged quickly, now they linger. Where once a damaged aircraft fled low and alone, now it climbs back toward friendly cover, protected by others. Hellcats operate in disciplined teams, overlapping fields of fire and altitude. Zeros, attempting to exploit damage, find themselves exposed instead. A Hellcat takes hits, smokes, then dives away. A Zero follows, eager for the kill. The American aircraft levels out, speed building rapidly. Another Hellcat drops in from above. The Zero has no armor, no margin, no escape. The engagement ends in seconds. By the time of the Battle of the Philippine Sea, the pattern is fully mature. Japanese pilots launch, knowing many will not return. They face aircraft that absorb punishment and pilots who have learned how to exploit that advantage ruthlessly. When the battle begins, Japanese formations break apart under sustained pressure. Escort fighters are dragged upward and destroyed. Bombers are cut down long before they reach their targets. What Japanese pilots experience that day is not simply defeat, it is helplessness. They hit American fighters. They damage them, and still the Hellcats keep flying. By nightfall, the sky is empty. For the Americans, the numbers are almost incomprehensible. Hundreds of enemy aircraft destroyed, minimal losses. Pilots return, shaken not by danger, but by how one-sided the fighting has become. Some struggle with it. Others understand immediately. This is what happens when survival becomes an advantage instead of a hope. The Hellcat has transformed air combat from a contest of individual brilliance into a system, one that rewards durability, coordination, and the ability to stay in the fight longer than the enemy. For Japanese pilots, there is no counter. The Zero was designed for a war that no longer exists. And in its place, the Hellcat has rewritten the rules of survival in the sky. The Pacific sky is quieter now, not because the danger has passed, but because Japanese air power has been spent. What aircraft remain fly fewer sorties, with less fuel, less training, and almost no expectation of survival. Hellcats still patrol overhead. They circle calmly above invasion fleets, above beaches choked with smoke, above carrier decks crowded with aircraft scarred by months of combat. Many of these fighters should have been lost long ago. Instead, they are still here patched, repaired, and flown again by pilots who have survived because their aircraft allowed them to. Japanese pilots who remain know the truth. They remember the first time their guns struck an American fighter and it did not fall. They remember chasing smoke trails that never ended in wreckage. They remember the fear, not of being outflown, but of being made irrelevant. Experience could no longer compensate for fragility. Courage could no longer overcome structure. The Hellcat did not need to outturn the Zero. It did not need elegance. It needed to endure, and it did. By war's end, Hellcat pilots have destroyed more enemy aircraft than any other Allied fighter. But the true legacy is not in the tally marks painted beneath cockpits. It is in the men who came home alive when they should not have. Naval aviation will never forget that lesson. From that point forward, American fighters are built with one assumption at their core. Pilots will be hit, and they must survive it. That assumption is born here over the Pacific, in the moment Japanese aces realized their bullets were no longer enough. When an American fighter absorbed everything they had and kept flying.